So I recently read an article about the Perfect Dark that's currently in development, and being a massive fan of the original, I'm extremely happy to see that they're going down this route and trying to reboot the series in some way. Now what reading this article did most for me was it made me really want to play the original again, so that's exactly what I did. I fired it up on an emulator and I've had so much fun going through the campaign and also just playing against bots on the multiplayer, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail later in this video. So Perfect Dark was made by the same developers as those who made GoldenEye 64, which as we all know was pretty revolutionary in the first-person shooter genre. So in many ways Perfect Dark was kind of a sequel to GoldenEye, obviously not in terms of storyline, but in terms of gameplay and the kind of first-person shooter features that it has, it was very much seen as a bit of a sequel to GoldenEye 64, and I think they did this sequel in such a good way, which tends to be a bit more rare these days. I think you're more likely to see these days a sequel not deviate too much from the original. It'll build upon it usually in many ways, but it will really try not to deviate too much because of the obvious fear of losing that audience that loved the original. Now, Perfect Dark, I think, did the best approach, which is they built upon the things that were obviously good, the gunplay and stuff like that, the animations, which were really solid in GoldenEye 64. They built upon them and made them better, and they are significantly better. A lot of the animations are really, really good in Perfect Dark. You can even shoot the weapons out of people's hands, which I forgot about, and depending on where you hit them, they'll react in different ways. It was just solid animations that I kind of forgot about and wasn't expecting to see when I fired up Perfect Dark again. Anyway, yeah, they built on those aspects, but in terms of the storyline, whereas GoldenEye 64 is much more of a traditional spy story against humans, nothing too crazy going on. Perfect Dark is just, it gets wild. I mean, you end up fighting on the side of one alien race against another alien race, although it does start in a much more traditional way, with you just investigating a corporation that's being a bit dodgy and you fighting against traditional bad guys, just humans, that's all you're fighting against. And then as the story progresses, as I said, it just gets more and more wild. You end up saving an alien called Elvis and he ends up help you fight against a more evil alien race. And I think what this highlights more than anything is the amount of creative freedom that these developers would have been given since GoldenEye 64, which also, I should note, came out 3 years prior to Perfect Dark, so they had plenty of time to work on it. It seems like it wasn't a massive crunch to get Perfect Dark done. Now, I don't know that for sure, I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but it certainly wasn't one of those ones. This was successful, let's get a new game out next year no matter what. Now, it's hard to talk about Perfect Dark without comparisons to GoldenEye 64, and one big difference between the games is the addition of cinematic cutscenes at the end and at the start of missions. And obviously this helps with telling the story, and maybe GoldenEye 64 didn't need to do this so much because it was an adaptation of, or a game based on, a movie, which can kind of lean on the movie to do a bit of the backstory and a bit of the storytelling for them. So Perfect Dark had to kind of use those cinematics, and they work really well with guiding you through what's going on in the background story as you go through the campaign. So there's a lot of focus on the story, which I think is always really important for first-person shooters, because it gets you a lot more engaged in the game and actually what you're doing rather than just going about shooting random people. And one of the big benefits of the amount of creative freedom they were given, and also the kind of story that they were going for, is that there's a great deal of diversity in the environment, in the type of maps that you play through for each mission, so you never really get bored of a particular area before moving on to the next one. The actual levels aren't particularly big, and if you really know what you're doing, you can actually get through them in a pretty decent time. There are 3 difficulty settings that you go through. One kind of easy, like the typical easy, medium, hard, except if you go back to these old games, one of the first things you realize is just how much more difficult these older games are. I mean, some of the things you got to figure out, because I haven't played these old games for a while, I think back in the day you expect it to be kind of hard to figure out. There's no way you're first timing some of these missions. You go to it, it's like, what on earth is this clue that I've got to figure out in order to progress on this level? I remember one, you had to blow through this wall, and there was just the tiniest little crack in a section of the wall which let you know that this is the area you need to blow through, and I was stuck on that for ages. Eventually I had to consult a walkthrough, I've got to confess, but yeah, so it's the difficulty of each level is hard, the difficulty of the game is pretty hard, so you end up playing through it a few times, and then if you get really good at it, you can get those quick times which unlock cheats, and that's kind of the target for the game. So although the missions can be quite short once you know what to do, it will take you a bit of time to figure out what you actually have to do. So yeah, there's plenty of value in the game. You've also got the music, which is absolutely sensational. GoldenEye's music was really, really good, and Perfect Dark's music is also just exceptional. They do such a good job with the music. When I was actually recording the footage for this, I was thinking, oh, maybe I should turn the music off so that it's easier to kind of talk over it. There's not so much jumping between different scenes having different music, but I couldn't do that to myself. The music was so good, I had to keep it on no matter what as I was playing through and recording this stuff for you guys. What I would say is a bit suspect, as it was in GoldenEye and as it tends to be in these older games, and actually still is with a lot of new games that come out. That's the AI. I mean, they're pretty dodgy. You can kind of just tend to be able to just camp a certain area and they'll just run towards you or do something like that. Occasionally they'll do some fairly clever things, or at least it seems like they're doing clever things. It's probably just a roll of the dice. They're doing something random, and to me it seems like they're doing something clever and it's just accidental in reality. But yeah, AI is a bit dodgy, but you've got to give them a break considering how old the game is and how much people still struggle with AI these days. So yeah, the single player is a lot of fun to go through. The storyline, the actual shooting mechanics are really good still, bizarrely considering how old it is. So I'd recommend you, especially if you've got some kind of emulator where you can run it on, I'd recommend you give it a go through it again. If you played it when you were younger, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of nostalgia, and that kind of thing helps you overlook some slightly dodgy AI here and there. But moving on to the multiplayer. Now, I remember as a little youngster when Perfect Dark came out, a big thing, a huge thing, was having the AI added to the multiplayer. Obviously, you played a lot of GoldenEye 64, which had no bots or anything like that, so it was always just PvP, player v player, and with me and my brothers, that tended to result in plenty of fights. So having bots was a really good way of just having it so we could be on one team, the bots be on another, and we played a load of Perfect Dark multiplayer, more than we played GoldenEye 64 multiplayer. I'm absolutely certain of that. There were good levels, good customization you could do, plenty of thought had gone into it. You've got these the different characters you could have for the bots, which would have different play styles, different personalities type thing, and also obviously different attributes. So yeah, the multiplayer of Perfect Dark, I know me and my friends and my brothers just put so much time into it. It was really well done, and I think it's something that with these older games, you know, the couch co-op or couch multiplayer used to be just the thing. There was obviously no online multiplayer, so that used to be a thing that used to take up all of your time, and it was good to go back to it, even though I was playing on my own this time. Playing against bots, it still holds up pretty well, but it's pretty challenging when you bump up their difficulty. So yeah, I think the multiplayer edition of Perfect Dark, adding in the bots, adding in a few new things here and there, is just it's just one of those ones where it built upon something that was already really good in GoldenEye, and they just made it a little bit better. Multiplayer is also something I'm going to be extremely interested to see what they do for the new Perfect Dark. I would have to assume they're going to do a similar kind of arena shooter, but obviously you'll be able to play people online and not just against bots. So it'll be interesting to see. They might just bypass multiplayer altogether, which I think would be a massive shame considering how big a part it played in the original Perfect Dark. So actually, just to close this one out, I think I'll just give a few thoughts on the new Perfect Dark that's going to be coming out. Now, it's not going to be coming out for some time, which I kind of like. I think they've taken the approach of just take as much time as it needs, which is always a good sign when it comes to these games. So I really do want it to be good. I've read a few things. I don't want to talk about them too much because there's so little information that's out there. It's so hard to know. It's so hard to read into it and make any kind of decent guesses as to what the game's going to be like. I've read a few things which I'm a bit like, ooh, not too sure, and one of those was just the fact that it's I think there's a lot of environmental issues that are happening in the game, so things have just turned bad. It's set in the near future, which is fine. I don't care, that's fine, do that, as long as they don't try and spread too much of a message. And I say that just because in my experience when games try to do that and take away from the focus on the actual game, yeah, the gameplay and the actual game aspect of it really tends to take a hit because the attention of the developers is not in the right place. But like I said, I've only read very fleeting things, so it's way too early for me to make a judgment on that kind of thing. And I also read in the article, and I'm pretty sure this was just the opinion of the article writer, that they're going to be that they expect them to be moving away from the sci-fi element and into more realistic, kind of more modern-y type of a story, which, like I said in the start of this video, I think I really like the fact that they had the creative freedom to go into that sci-fi realm and bring like aliens and stuff like that into it. I think if that doesn't make an appearance again in this one, I think it'd be a massive shame. I think they'd be playing it too safe if that was the case. So I hope they don't feel like they can't take any risks by bringing back aliens, which albeit is maybe a bit dated in terms of storylines that we see nowadays, but it's something that I think Perfect Dark fans would love to see. And I should also say, and I probably should have said this earlier, but it's fairly obvious that obviously Perfect Dark, yes, they had a lot of creative freedom, but compared to GoldenEye, when you think of it as potentially a kind of sequel to it, but obviously it is a different title. It's not GoldenEye 2, so the doors are open a bit more for them just to go wild with the storyline. Whereas the Perfect Dark reboot, obviously that's more constrained by what we've seen in Perfect Dark 1, so I'm not expecting something completely different to Perfect Dark 1, and I think the challenging thing is to balance the keeping stuff faithful to the original whilst also doing some things that are creative and new for the new one. So fingers crossed for it. I really obviously can't say too much more until we get more information about it, but yeah, I love the Perfect Dark series. I think it's great to have it back. I'm hoping it's not just going to be a one-hit wonder, although I suspect, I don't know, we'll see. Obviously if it does well, I'm sure they'll make more Perfect Darks after that. Yeah, love the original, can't wait to see what the new one holds, and fingers crossed it's going to be a good one. But anyway guys, that's going to be it for this video, and as per usual, if you liked it, make sure you leave a like, and if you are enjoying these videos, think about subscribing. Cheers guys.